Welcome to episode 17 of your Daily Dose of Sunday School, looking at Scripture Alone by James White. We're talking about the canon. So canon is the list of books, which books are included in the Scripture. And to avoid confusion and to avoid arguments that might lead us astray, I want to keep in mind that really we should be talking about canon in two ways. One is what I'm going to call the divine canon. God wrote Scripture. And so God has perfect knowledge of what books he wrote. And so there's a divine canon that is always perfect. There's also a church canon. That's the second way we should mean it. So the church is seeking to understand which books were written by God and which were not. They are not like God through their authority of writing the word, determining the canon. They are simply recognizing. They are trying to make what they see on earth line up with what God already knows in Scripture. See, James White has this good phrase that he says that canon is an artifact of revelation. Canon is an artifact of revelation. And it is not itself revelation. And I think that's where it gets tricky. If you're arguing with a Roman Catholic, is they're wanting to promote the authority of the church. Therefore, okay, well, how do you get the canon? Well, yes, the canon is an important piece of knowledge. It is not itself revelation, but it is an artifact of revelation. It exists because there are some books that God wrote and some books that God did not write. If you're an author, you are going to have infallible knowledge of the books you wrote. And anyone else is going to have mediated knowledge. It's going to rely on you as the author to tell them what you wrote. The divine canon exists whether or not the church canon exists. And often, the church canon lags behind the divine canon. Of course, there's still discrepancies, but you think about the moment that Paul wrote 1 Corinthians, and he's holding Scripture in his hand. He's holding Scripture in his hand. Nobody except for him and a scribe maybe know it exists. And so their understanding of the canon is matching up fairly closely with God's understanding, and yet all these churches do not know it yet. So it's going to lag behind. And what we see, if you look at the history of the canon, is that it takes churches in different regions to, they've been geographically separated, for them to compare notes and then to, you don't have 2 Corinthians? Let's share that with you. And the church came to consensus because we're able to recognize what was Scripture, but they didn't all have it at one time. And so that the church canon lags behind divine canon. So the church canon is dependent upon God's purpose. It is God's purpose. We'll look at tomorrow. It is God's purpose for us to have His Word and to have it completely. All of these books were written for our encouragement And so he's the one, his power and authority, he's going to make sure that that happens. And he will use his church also. We will look tomorrow at some verses that add a little more light onto this. But I hope that's helpful in your thinking about the canon. Have a really good day.